Hey guys, welcome back to another Unboxing Boxes adventure. For this particular adventure, we have just 2 boxes on hand. There is a heap more over here in the pile to my right, but we're only going to have time for 2 boxes today. As I mentioned in last week's episode, we're going to attempt to fix the Thermaltake Core P3 Liquid Cool build. Again, there isn't any issue with the liquid cooling part itself. That works amazingly well. Back when we finished the build in August, everything seemed fine. The system benchmarked well and was perfectly stable. About 3 weeks after completing the build, we had to review the GTX 1070 GameRock Premium Edition graphics card, which Pallet sent over with a liquid cooling block. To test it out, we removed the GTX 1080 from the P3 loop and installed the GameRock card. This all went well, and once the review was completed, we reinstalled the GTX 1080. Draining the liquid, refitting the card, and then pouring the liquid back in all went smoothly. Basically everything on the surface appeared fine. However, something odd happened. We could no longer watch videos on the P3 system. Games seemed to work okay though, so we knew the graphics card wasn't damaged, and that was, I have to say, a big relief. Last thing you want to do is go kill a Founders Edition GTX 1080. That wouldn't have gone over particularly well. But with the graphics card confirmed as A-OK, we believed the next culprit would likely be the drivers, some sort of software glitch. Anyway, we did a clean sweep, did that into safe mode, got rid of all the drivers, started again, and encountered the same problem. So the next logical step was to believe it had something to do with the Windows install. I don't know what could have gone wrong between, we hadn't done anything from the last time we used the system to now, but who knows? We were running out of ideas quickly. We were overlooking the obvious, but I'll get to that shortly. By taking the SSD out of the Core P3, whacking it in one of our test systems, fired it up, everything worked fine. Did the reverse, took the test system SSD out, put it in the Core P3, and sure enough, videos were artifacting and games had noticeable stutter. So clearly then it was a problem with the hardware in the Core P3 build, either something to do with the motherboard, or what we eventually found it to be. By this point it was narrowed down to a hardware issue, and then I had a light bulb moment. I had heard of issues with the Thermaltake riser cables, and I think even some of you guys warned us in the comments during the P3 build series. As it turned out, Thermaltake had recently sent along some spare cables. They didn't really say why. It was more of a, here, have these cables guys kind of situation. Carefully installing one of the replacement cables, which is a serious pain in a hard-pipe liquid-cooled system I might add, the issue seemed to go away and the system ran as expected. However, I wasn't satisfied with that, and I did a little further investigating with these new cables. Despite everything looking okay on the surface, at times I did notice frame stuttering in games. Not something you expect to see with a GeForce GTX 1080, Core i7-6950X and 64GB of DDR4 memory. Opening up a little application called Latency Mon, everything seemed okay at idle. However, the second I played a YouTube video or loaded a game, the interrupts to process latency went through the roof. This meant the system was having trouble handling real-time audio and video, amongst other things. A second riser cable was installed with no kinks or bends, and the same issue with latency was found. Bending the cable in any way amplified the issue massively, and without too much rough handling it was pretty easy to damage the cable to the point where it would no longer work. Sadly though, to some of you guys, this will not be news. This has been an ongoing issue for quite some time now, and Thermaltake has even owned up to it. The problem being they haven't really fixed it, despite, replacing cables and saying they have found the issues, which it appears like they haven't. Over on the Thermaltake forums, you will find a number of detailed threads from customers having similar experiences and frustrations to us. The solution, unfortunately, is a rather expensive one. Most are turning to a shielded riser cable from 3M. Those that have purchased this cable claim that it works perfectly, and really it would want to given the hideous price tag of $120 US. Given that's the retail price for Thermaltake's Core P3, it's really not an ideal solution. Finding a replacement cable in Australia isn't easy, but in the end I picked up a Lian Li PCIe x16 cable that goes by the model name PWPCIe38-1. I picked mine up from AusPC Market for $118. So let's take a look at it, install it in the Core P3 rig, and hopefully all my troubles go away. Could it be that simple? Alright, plain looking box. It does have what we want inside, which is good, or at least it should. It's advertised to have what we need. This is looking promising indeed. Wow, that's a much more impressive looking cable than what we currently have. Got 2 screws to secure it if you don't have 2 screws. So that end obviously goes in your motherboard. Graphics card sits in there, so in our rig it would look something like it's actually way more cable than we need. You want to be careful not to bend them too aggressively at the ends here. That may not be too much of an issue for that cable. To give you guys some idea, these 2 here, I believe these 2 are the replacement cables. Kind of lost track of what's what at this point. I've put that many of these looking cables into that system. I think there's 4 in total I've used. But yeah, these are the cables. That's it with the shielding off. As you can see, it's just 2 ribbon cables, something that you'd sort of would have seen on the old hard drives or floppy drives or whatever like that, but not particularly impressive. And so the black stuff that you see on here is the shielding. If we peel it away here, you'll see that how well you can see the foil there. I might have to do some B-roll, but that foil there is meant to be the shielding. As you can see at the ends, it's not doing a great job of covering the cable in its entirety. But anyway, the cables, they don't work full stop. Let's just get that out of the way and make it clear that they do not work at all. I mean, even when they appear to be working, the latency through these cables is still just horrible. You might get away with it with low-end gear, but throw any high-end graphics cards on into this thing and you're gonna know about it. To avoid the bigger issues, you basically don't want to bend the cable at all, which is impossible to do. That's the whole point of a flexible riser cable. But, you know, that end in our build, that end will go on your motherboard. To get it working, we had to do like the most gentle, delicate bend there, and then this you have to bend all the way around. So you want it to sort of look like that. It's pretty difficult to do without bending it. And yeah, if you have a brand new fresh cable and you do that really delicate it will appear to work. There'll be a tiny bit of stuttering here and there, but you know, latency will still be terrible and you'll eventually notice more and more glitches. And if you do what we did on the second time we put it in and do something like a bit of an aggressive bend like that, it's going to be horrible and not work at all, which is what I suspect most people have done because that's just an easier, cleaner look. But yeah, it pretty much destroys the cable, and once you bend these things aggressively, bending them back doesn't solve the problem. You've screwed it. It's cactus. So we will install this one in a moment and see if that solves our problems. I'm hoping it will. I've heard reports that it does, but anyway, we'll get to that shortly. Before we do, we've got one box here that we'll have a look in, and this has been sent from or organized by Gigabyte. And it should be the last piece of our $1,200 US 1440p build. So thankfully I can finally put that thing together. Hopefully later this week, maybe Thursday afternoon, you'll see that video pop up where I do a bit of a time lapse of putting the whole thing together. And then I'll bust out a 1440p monitor and play some games on it and record that. So that should be really cool. Looking forward to doing that. Have been for weeks now. And finally, if this has what I think it has, which it does, it is the Gigabyte GTX 1070. It's a base model WindForce version. So it comes in at $380 US. And at the moment, I think Neweg's even throwing in a copy of Gears of War 4 for a limited time. So that's a really cool deal. For us Aussies, you're paying about $600 for this card, which is about as cheap as 1070s get. Sounds like a lot compared to the US price, but that's how the currency conversion and taxes and all that work out. And in RX 480, I think the cheapest ones in Australia are about $400 anyway. So you're paying $200 more for a 1070. So both cards are good value, but you definitely get your extra $200 worth out of this sucker, that's for sure. We'll have a quick look at it since we're going to spend so much time on the riser cables, which I know is thrilling, but it's an interesting issue, or a frustrating one, depending on whether you've bought one or not. So, what we have here, it's a pretty, I mean, it looks similar to the G1 Gaming. No doubt the cooler's slightly smaller. We're missing one fan. I'm sure there's been modifications, or rather downgrades to the power delivery. You've got one 8-pin connector, which I believe is the same situation on the G1 Gaming version. But I mean, it's going to be a capable card anyway, and you're certainly not losing any performance or anything like that compared to a Founders Edition or whatever. But yeah, $380, so it's as cheap as a 1070 gets, really, and it will perform as you would expect a 1070 too, which is all the reasons why we've picked it for our 1440p build. And it should look right at home in that build. But anyway, you'll see more of this card in probably Thursday's video, so stay tuned for that one. Alright, well, I think I should probably go and dig out the Core P3 system, and we'll try and squeeze the cable into that and see if we can get it installed. Right, so here is the beast. It's looking a little sadder. The graphics card's meant to be propped up, rather, a bit more like that. But we've had to take all the mounting gear out to try and change the riser cable. I'm not sure how I'm going to get this really big one in here without having a... I want to avoid draining the system, disconnecting the graphics card, and basically starting over from scratch, because we've done that too many times now. But if I have to, I will. But hopefully we can sort of do this a bit dodgy. And wriggle it out. So there's the cable that was in there, and that was probably working as well as any of them have. And that's what I'm talking about with the sort of more gentle bend off there. But while it was possible to play games without too much trouble, and the videos and all that were actually playing properly with this cable in there, with latency mon open, as soon as you loaded up a video, you saw the latency creep up, and a game it just shot off the scale, and basically informed you that this system would probably have trouble with real-time audio and video. So that's not something you want to see on a system worth the kind of money this thing is. So for 120 bucks we bought this, which hopefully solves all those problems, and we can still have this nice front-mounted graphics card, which looks really cool, and not have to redo all the plumbing and mount it like it would be vertically or horizontally. Anyway, let's try and put this 380mm long cable in here. I'm not sure where we're going to tuck all the excess. Okay, well, we got one end plugged in. I really don't want to bend the hell out of this thing. It's the last thing I want to do, so got to try and find a way to tuck all this behind the graphics card. It's a bit longer. This is not something you'd want to be doing if you'd forked out what this system is actually worth retail. Less than ideal. The absolute last thing you want to be doing is jiggling all this around to try and squeeze in a cable. You'd be sweating on a day that isn't 38 degrees, let's just say that. But I mean, that's connected up. That should be working now, so I might give that a quick go, and if that's all working, I'll put all the necessary mounting stuff back in, stop the card from drooping, and yeah, then we should all be good. But I mean, this, I'm not sure how it looks from the front, but I mean, that cable's not too bad. It's a lot longer than you need, obviously, but if it works, you're not really going to care too much, apart from the fact that you paid $120 for it and you probably didn't budget for that. But anyway, that's another story. I'll plug this in. I'll probably do an overlay of and some commentary of what I found with that cable installed. So, with the Lian Li cable installed, the latency issues went away. Latency Mon was no longer reporting the system was having trouble with real-time playback. At this point, I haven't had a chance to use the Core P3 extensively with this cable, but so far early indications look good. So, the real question being, can Thermaltake solve this issue? Honestly, I don't think they can. From what I've seen, all PCIe x16 riser cables that are properly shielded cost over $100. Meanwhile, Thermaltake charges just $20 for their shielded cable. Really, if it costs somewhere around $100 to produce a properly shielded cable, then I think it's fair to say Thermaltake are up that famous creek without a paddle. There's no way customers can justify spending $120 on a P3 case, only to then turn around and do what we've done and spend about another $120 on a cable that makes the case unique. It takes advantage of that front-facing graphics card. Without that, it's not nearly as an appealing product in my opinion. We genuinely do like Thermaltake products such as the Core P3 here at Harbour Unboxed. And the guys from the local Thermaltake team here in Melbourne are really, really good people. Still, you guys are our #1 priority, so at this point we strongly recommend you avoid using the Thermaltake riser cables, which sadly, as I just said, makes products such as the Core P3 and P5 a lot less appealing, which is disappointing. That's a bit of a downer to end on. So on a brighter note, later in the week we will have the $1,200 1440p gaming build and benchmark video. And before I plan to do that, I will have another interesting video, and this one looks at the best $200 Aussie graphics card. And it might not be the comparison you're expecting, so make sure you check that out. If all goes to plan, that should be on the channel tomorrow night. On a final note, do you guys think we should rename the unboxing series? The point of this series was to provide some light-hearted content, but I feel we could possibly be doing a bit more with the series. I still plan to keep showing you products that we get in. I think that's a fun little insight. But I feel like we could be covering other topics and issues on this segment, and I don't know if the unboxing boxes name would be appropriate for that kind of stuff. So any ideas or suggestions are welcomed. Generally the guys watching these series are our most loyal viewers, so we are keen to hear from you guys. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it and found the content interesting. As always, yeah, I'm going to say as always now. As always, I'm your host Steve, and please stay tuned because later this week we have some very, very interesting content coming your way.